The server, perceiving an impending danger, let out a piercing cry that ultimately saved the mob boss's existence. She anticipated a gesture of profound gratitude from him. Instead, he regarded her with an intensity that suggested she had suddenly become his most priceless acquisition. Now, enmeshed in his clandestine realm and under his constant scrutiny, he had unequivocally communicated one directive. She was not to depart. The flickering neon sign of Rossi's diner pulsed against Chicago's damp pavement, casting crimson hues across the deserted parking lot. It was 2:47 a.m., and the city hummed with that perilous stillness, the kind that compels astute individuals to secure their dwellings. Matteo Vitali fastened the buttons of his charcoal suit jacket and stepped into the biting November chill. The warmth of the diner receded behind him as the door swung shut. His two bodyguards, Frankie and Tommy, immediately flanked him, their gazes sweeping the darkness with the intensity of hunters. "Boss, car's ready," Frankie announced, nodding toward the sleek black Mercedes gliding 30 feet away. Matteo barely acknowledged him, his thoughts consumed by the recent meeting. His mind dwelled on the intricate deals poised to redefine the South Side territory and the adversaries he had eliminated to secure his ascent. At 34, he had forged an empire from his father's decaying legacy. Through ruthless strategy and an unyielding resolve, he had become, or so he believed, invulnerable. His Italian leather shoes clicked on the asphalt as he approached the Mercedes. Marco, one of his most trusted drivers, sat rigidly behind the wheel, the engine purring softly. Everything appeared normal, yet a pervasive sense of unease gnawed at him. Matteo's hand extended toward the door handle. "Don't get in the car!" The scream tore through the silence like gunfire. Matteo's hand froze midair. His guards instinctively drew their weapons, swiveling towards the source of the commotion. From the diner's side entrance, a young woman burst into the parking lot, her waitress apron still tied around her waist, her dark hair a wild halo around her face. "Don't! Please don't open that door," she gasped, rushing towards them with a terror so palpable it was contagious. "Stay back!" Tommy aimed his pistol at her chest, but Matteo raised a hand, stopping him. Something in the woman's eyes, a raw, unadulterated fear, gave him pause. In his world, fear was a common currency, and he could discern the authentic from the feigned. This was undeniably real. "Frankie," Matteo commanded quietly, his voice like gravel. "Open the door." "Boss, open it." Frankie approached the Mercedes cautiously, gun raised. He yanked open the back door, and two men exploded from within the car. They were not Marco's assistants, but assassins, crammed into the footwell and behind the seats. One lunged at Frankie with a knife. The other raised a shotgun toward Matteo. The parking lot erupted into chaos. Matteo moved with the fluid precision of a man who had navigated 3 decades in a world where hesitation guaranteed demise. His hand darted inside his jacket, drawing his Beretta in one seamless motion. He fired twice, center mass, just as his father had taught him. The shotgun-wielding assassin collapsed before he could pull the trigger. Frankie grappled with the knife attacker, both men crashing against the car. Tommy surged forward, but a third assailant, previously unseen, emerged from the driver's seat, firing erratically. Marco's body slumped forward, blood splattering the window. He had been dead before they even stepped outside. The waitress screamed, dropping to the ground, hands covering her head. Matteo's second shot struck the driver-assassin in the throat. The man gurgled, then fell. Frankie finally subdued his attacker, snapping the man's wrist and slamming his head against the car door until he went limp. A sudden silence descended, broken only by their ragged breathing and the hiss of the Mercedes's punctured tire. 3 bodies, 3 seconds. Such was Matteo's world. He did not lower his weapon. His eyes meticulously swept the parking lot, the rooftops, and the surrounding shadows. "Clear the perimeter now," he ordered. Tommy and Frankie dispersed, weapons drawn, meticulously checking every corner. Matteo approached the trembling waitress, still huddled on the ground. He stood over her, gun at his side, and for the first time, truly observed her. She was young, perhaps 24, 25, attractive in that unassuming, girl-next-door way that seemed utterly out of place in his brutal reality. Her name tag, Clara, was inscribed in faded letters. Her hands shook violently as she slowly looked up at him, her brown eyes wide with shock. "Get up!" Matteo commanded, his voice devoid of warmth despite the adrenaline still coursing through his veins. Clara struggled to her feet, nearly falling. She pressed herself against the diner's brick wall, her gaze darting from the bodies to the blood spreading across the pavement, and finally to the man who had effortlessly ended 3 lives. Matteo holstered his gun and stepped closer, too close. Intimidation was an ingrained reflex. "How did you know?" His words were a quiet threat. I... Clara's voice fractured. "How did you know?" Each word struck like a hammer. Tears streamed down her face, but she forced the explanation out. "I've seen them before. Those men, 2 years ago, they came to my family's restaurant in Indianapolis. They took my brother, Antonio. They took him, and we never..." She choked back a sob. "I recognized the one with the knife, same scar on his neck. I could never forget." Matteo scrutinized her face, searching for any hint of deceit. He had interrogated hundreds. He could detect a lie in a heartbeat, a breath, a blink. This girl was speaking the truth, yet that presented an even greater dilemma. Frankie returned, slightly breathless. "Perimeter clear, boss, but we gotta move. Cops will be here in 5 minutes, maybe less." Matteo kept his gaze fixed on Clara. "Your brother? These men took him." She nodded desperately. "They wanted money from my family. We paid everything we had, but Antonio never came home. The police said... They said he probably ran away, but I knew. I knew they killed him." Her voice cracked with 2 years of suppressed grief. Tommy appeared on Matteo's other side. "Boss, she could be part of this, could be the bait." "I'm not! I swear to God, I'm not." Clara's legs nearly buckled. When I saw them getting out of that car through the kitchen window, I knew something was wrong." "She saved your life, boss," Frankie interjected carefully. "But Tommy's right. Could be a setup. Make us trust her. Use her later." Matteo's jaw tightened. In his world, coincidences were non-existent, but so were waitresses who risked their lives to scream warnings at Mafia bosses. Sirens wailed in the distance. He made his decision. "Bring her." "What?" Clara's eyes widened with terror. No, I need to go home. I need to..." Matteo seized her arm, not roughly, but with an unyielding grip that conveyed his absolute authority. "You just witnessed an attempt on my life. You know their faces. You're coming with me, or you're dead by morning. Your choice." "That's not a choice," she protested. "It's the only one you've got." The sirens grew louder. Frankie pulled up a second car, a nondescript Honda they kept for emergencies. Matteo propelled Clara toward it. "Please," she whispered, one last desperate plea. "I just wanted to save your life." Matteo paused at the car door, studying her tear-streaked face for a final moment. Something flickered within his chest, a sensation he had buried years ago beneath layers of scarred tissue and cold calculation. "That's precisely why you're coming with me," he stated. Then he pushed her into the back seat and climbed in after her, leaving the bodies, the blood, and the only normal existence Clara had ever known behind in that parking lot. The Honda's tires shrieked as they vanished into Chicago's dark heart, and Clara realized with mounting dread that she had merely exchanged one nightmare for another. The Honda sped through Chicago's deserted streets, disregarding red lights and weaving through industrial districts where anonymity was paramount. Clara sat pressed against the door, as far from Matteo in the back seat as possible. Her entire body trembled from the cold, from fear, and from the indelible image of 3 dying men etched into her mind. Frankie drove with one hand, his other resting on his lap, cradling a gun. Tommy twisted in the front passenger seat, his gaze fixed on Clara as if she might spontaneously combust. "Who do you work for?" Tommy's voice was sharp, accusatory. What? Nobody. I work at the diner." "That's far too convenient. You just happened to see them, just happened to recognize them." "I told you, they took my brother." "Yeah, a real sob story." Tommy's eyes were cold. "How much did the Caleb family pay you? Or was it the Russians?" "I don't know what you're talking about." Clara's voice rose in panic. "Enough." Matteo's single word brought an abrupt silence to the car. He sat perfectly still, his blood-splattered suit appearing black in the darkness. His face was unreadable, neither angry nor kind, merely calculating. "We'll get answers at the estate." Clara's stomach plummeted. Estate? No, please, just let me go home. I won't tell anyone what I saw, I promise. Your promises mean nothing. Matteo finally looked at her, and in his dark eyes she saw something more terrifying than guns or corpses. An absolute void. You're a liability now. The men who set that trap will know it failed. They'll know someone warned me, and they'll come looking. Then give me a bus ticket. I'll leave Chicago tonight. And lead them straight to your family. Matteo's voice was almost gentle, which somehow made it worse. You think they won't already be watching your apartment, your mother's house in Indianapolis? Clara's blood ran cold. My mother? You know where my mother... I know everything now. Made 2 phone calls before we left that parking lot. He held up his phone. Clara Marie Brennan, 26 years old, moved to Chicago 8 months ago after your family's restaurant went bankrupt. Your mother, Susan, still lives on Maple Street. Your younger sister, Emma, is a sophomore at Indiana State. Tears streamed down Clara's face. Please don't hurt them. They have nothing to do with this. I don't hurt civilians, Matteo stated flatly. But my enemies do. So, until I know who you really are and what you really know, you're staying where I can see you. The car pulled through a gate that materialized from nowhere, hidden amidst trees and shadows. They drove for 2 full minutes up a winding private road before a colossal structure emerged. Not merely a house, but a mansion. 3 stories of stone and glass that screamed of immense wealth and power. Armed figures materialized from the shadows as the Honda drew to a halt. Clara recognized in their movements the same chilling precision Matteo had displayed in the parking lot. These were clearly no ordinary security personnel. Matteo stepped from the car, adjusting his jacket, seemingly oblivious to the bloodstains. Bring her inside. Guest room on the 3rd floor. Lock it. Boss, are you certain about this? Frankie interjected, gripping Clara's arm and yanking her from the vehicle. She could be carrying a tracker, could be relaying information right now. Then search her and seize her phone. Matteo began walking toward the house, then paused. And Frankie, she is not to be harmed, not until I decide her purpose. Clara stumbled as Frankie propelled her up marble stairs and through doors that likely cost more than her entire existence. The interior was a symphony of dark wood and opulent artwork, exquisite yet as cold as a mausoleum. A stern-faced woman in a black suit materialized, radiating professional efficiency. She conducted a thorough pat-down, confiscating Clara's phone, keys, and even the pen from her apron pocket. She's clean, the woman reported. No weapons, no wires, no tracking devices. That proves nothing, Tommy growled, trailing behind them up a grand staircase. The clever ones don't carry devices. They commit everything to memory. I'm not clever, Clara's voice cracked with a touch of hysteria. I barely finished high school. I serve eggs and coffee. I don't even know what you people do. We're businessmen, Matteo stated from behind them, his footsteps barely audible on the carpet. Businessmen don't murder people in parking lots. Depends on the business. They reached the 3rd floor. Frankie opened a door, revealing a room that resembled a luxury hotel suite. A king-sized bed, a private bathroom, even a small sitting area. It would have been beautiful had it not been a cage. Why? Clara turned to face Matteo, desperation overpowering her fear. Why are you doing this? I saved her life, perhaps. Matteo leaned against the doorframe, his empty gaze scrutinizing her. Or perhaps you are precisely what my adversaries desired, an innocent-looking girl who would cause me to lower my guard. I'm not... My driver, Marco, had a wife and 2 children, Matteo continued, his voice as unyielding as stone. He was with me for 12 years. Someone granted those assassins access to my car, my schedule, my precise location. Someone betrayed me tonight. And until I know who, everyone is a suspect. He stepped closer, and Clara recoiled until her back met the wall. So, here's how this will proceed, Matteo said softly. Tomorrow you will recount everything about the men who abducted your brother. Every detail, every face, every word. Because either you are fabricating your story and collaborating with my enemies, or you are speaking the truth and you are the key to uncovering who is attempting to kill me. And if I tell you everything, Clara whispered, then perhaps you will survive long enough to return home. And if you don't believe me? Matteo's expression remained impassive. Then you won't. He retreated into the hallway. Frankie followed, pulling the door shut. Clara heard the click of the lock, a sound like a coffin ceiling. She was alone in a gilded cage, surrounded by men who killed without hesitation, held captive by a man who perceived her as either a tool or a threat. Clara slid down the wall, burying her face in her hands, finally allowing herself to crumble. Hours ago, her greatest concern had been earning enough tips to cover rent. Now, she questioned whether she would live to see tomorrow. Clara did not sleep. She sat on the edge of the bed, watching the dawn break through the barred windows, painting the luxurious prison in mocking shades of gold. Every sound startled her. Footsteps in the hall, doors closing somewhere below, the distant murmur of voices. At 7 a.m., the lock clicked. Frankie entered, carrying a tray. Coffee, eggs, toast. He placed it on the desk without a word, his face impassive. "Am I going to die today?" Clara asked, her voice hoarse from crying. Frankie paused at the door. "That depends on what you tell the boss. I've already told him everything. Then you had better recall more." He exited, locking her in once more. Clara forced herself to eat, knowing she would need her strength for whatever came next. The eggs tasted like ash. An hour later, 3 men arrived for her. Tommy led the way, his hostility barely contained. Frankie followed, and behind him was a new face. A slender man in an expensive suit, with silver hair and calculating eyes. He resembled an accountant, but the way he scrutinized Clara sent shivers down her spine. "The boss wants to see you," Tommy stated. "Try anything foolish, and I'll put a bullet in your knee. Understood?" Clara nodded, not trusting her voice. They escorted her down to the second floor, through hallways adorned with art likely worth millions, into a study that exuded the scent of leather and old money. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, a massive oak desk, and seated behind it, Matteo Vitali, looking far more menacing in the morning light than he had in the darkness. He had changed into a fresh suit, black on black. His face was clean-shaven, his dark hair impeccably styled. He appeared like a CEO, not a killer, but Clara knew better now. "Sit." He gestured to a chair facing his desk. Clara sat, feeling as though she faced both judge and executioner. The silver-haired man closed the door and leaned against it, arms crossed. Frankie and Tommy flanked Matteo's desk like statues. Matteo opened a folder and spread photographs across the desk. Crime scene photos, brutal, bloody, horrifying. Clara's stomach churned. "Recognize any of these men?" Matteo asked, his tone businesslike. Clara compelled herself to look. Bodies in alleys, in cars, in warehouses. Some shot, some worse. Her hand trembled as she pointed to one photo. "Him, the one with the scar, that's the man from the parking lot, the one Frankie." She couldn't finish. "Good." Matteo pulled that photo aside. "His name was Vincent Russo, low-level enforcer for the Calibri family. Your turn, Tommy." Tommy slammed down a different photo. A restaurant. Broken windows. Chairs overturned. "This your family's place in Indianapolis?" Clara's breath hitched. "How did you—" "Answer the question." "Yes, that's Papa Giovanni's, my father's restaurant." Tears stung her eyes. "That's where they took Antonio. 2 years ago, the Calibri family was expanding into Indiana," the silver-haired man interjected, his voice smooth and cold. "They employed protection rackets, pay up or be destroyed. Your father refused. He couldn't afford it. We were barely surviving." Clara's voice broke. "They came 3 times. The 3rd time they dragged Antonio out by his hair and—" She stopped. The memory was too painful. "And you paid," Matteo finished. $20,000, your mother's entire retirement savings." Clara's head snapped up. "How do you know that?" "Because I make it my business to know everything." Matteo leaned forward, his eyes piercing hers. "Here's what troubles me, Clara. The Calibri family doesn't typically kill once they're paid. They're businessmen like me. Once they receive their money, the debt is settled. They didn't keep their word." "Or," Tommy interrupted harshly, "your brother wasn't kidnapped at all. Perhaps he owed them money himself. Gambling debt, drug debt. Perhaps he played you, and you're playing us." "Antonio was 17, Clara retorted, anger slicing through her fear. He worked at the restaurant after school. He didn't gamble, didn't do drugs. Everyone says that about their dead brother, Tommy sneered. We don't know he's dead. Clara stood up, fury overwhelming common sense. We never found a body. The police never found anything. He just disappeared. Sit down. Matteo's voice was quiet but absolute. Clara sat, shaking with rage and grief. The silver-haired man spoke again. Miss Brennan, I'm Vincent Castellano, Mr. Vitali's attorney and advisor. I need you to understand something. The timing of your appearance is extraordinarily suspicious. You arrive in Chicago 8 months ago. You secure a job at a diner Mr. Vitali frequents. Last night, you're conveniently positioned to witness assassins and warn him. From our perspective, this looks like a very elaborate setup. A setup where I save his life, Clara's voice rose. That doesn't make sense. Sure it does, Tommy asserted. Save the boss, earn his trust, gain entry to the organization, then feed information to his enemies. Classic infiltration. I don't even know who his enemies are. I don't know anything about any of this. Clara turned to Matteo, desperate. Please, I'm a waitress. I live in a studio apartment that smells like mold. I eat ramen 4 nights a week. I'm nobody. I just saw men who hurt my family, and I couldn't... Her voice cracked. I couldn't let them hurt someone else. That's all. That's the only reason I screamed. Matteo studied her in silence, his expression unreadable. The room felt as though it was shrinking. Finally, he spoke. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to tell Vincent everything you recall about your brother's kidnapping. Every detail, no matter how insignificant. Names, faces, cars, words, everything. Then we're going to corroborate your story, piece by piece. And then I can go home? And then we'll determine if you're a victim or a spy. Matteo stood, buttoning his jacket. If you're lying, Clara, if you're working with the people who killed Marco and tried to kill me, I promise you will regret ever learning my name. He walked toward the door, then paused. But if you're telling the truth, if you truly are just an unlucky waitress who saved my life, he looked back at her, something flickering in those cold eyes, then you might be the key to destroying my enemies. Either way, you're mine now, until I know which. The door closed behind him, with a sound like a death sentence. Clara sat alone with Vincent Castellano, who retrieved a notepad and pen with the cold efficiency of a man about to dissect her entire life. Let's begin from the start, he said. The day they took your brother. 3 days passed like years. Clara remained confined to the third-floor room, yet her prison had become strangely comfortable. Meals arrived 3 times daily. Not prison fare, but genuine cuisine. Someone had meticulously stocked her room with new clothes in her exact size, the bathroom brimming with lavish toiletries, and even a selection of books on the nightstand, as if to make her imprisonment more tolerable. This swift normalization of luxury was, in its own way, unsettling. Every day, Vincent Castellano subjected her to hours of interrogation, diligently recording every detail. His thoroughness and patience were chillingly devoid of emotion. Much like a surgeon methodically dissecting memories, Clara recounted Antonio's infectious laugh, his fervent aspirations for culinary school, and the terrifying image of him being dragged into a black van by Vincent Russo. By the 3rd day, she was utterly drained, a hollow shell of her former self. That evening, Frankie approached her door with an unexpected directive. "Boss needs you downstairs," he stated. Clara's heart pounded against her ribs. "Why?" she managed. Didn't say, just said to bring you. She trailed him down to the 2nd floor, but instead of the study, they halted before an unfamiliar door. Frankie gave a single knock. "Come in," a strained voice, Matteo's, responded. Frankie gently pushed the door open, ushering Clara inside. She found herself in what appeared to be a private sitting room, complete with leather couches, a bar cart, and subdued lighting. Matteo reclined on a couch, his shirt unbuttoned and casually open, revealing a bandage around his ribs, crimson seeping through the white gauze. "Close the door," Matteo instructed, and Clara heard the click as it shut behind her, leaving them alone. "You're bleeding," she uttered, the obvious escaping her lips as her mind struggled to process anything else. "One of the assassins got me with his knife," Matteo explained. "Didn't realize how deep until today." He winced, pressing a hand against the wound. "My usual doctor's out of the city. Vincent tried, but he's useless with medical stuff." "You need a hospital," Clara insisted. I need discretion, Matteo countered, his eyes meeting hers. Hospitals ask questions. Gunshot wounds, stab wounds. They call the police. Can't have that. Clara understood. He operated entirely outside the law. Why am I here? She asked. Vincent says you told him you were pre-med for a year before your family lost everything. Matteo gestured toward a first aid kit on the coffee table, professional grade, the kind paramedics carried. Is that true? Clara slowly nodded. 1 year at Indiana University, before we couldn't afford tuition anymore. Then you know how to stitch. She stared at him, disbelief etched on her face. You want me to? The bleeding's getting worse. Vincent already cleaned it and tried to close it, but he made a mess of it. Matteo's jaw tightened with pain. So, either you help me, or I bleed out on this couch. Your choice. Clara's thoughts raced. This was utterly insane. He had held her captive, threatened her family, and treated her like a criminal for 3 days. Now, he expected her to save his life. Yet, seeing the blood spreading across the bandage, she knew he wasn't exaggerating the severity. Fine, she heard herself say, but I need better light, and you need to lie flat. Matteo shifted onto the couch, stretching out with a barely stifled groan. Clara switched on every lamp in the room, then opened the first aid kit. Her hands trembled as she pulled on latex gloves. Nervous? Matteo watched her with those inscrutable eyes. I'm about to put a needle in a Mafia boss, Clara stated, her voice steadier than she felt. Yeah, I'm nervous. A fleeting flicker, perhaps a smile, crossed his face. Fair point. Clara carefully peeled away the blood-soaked bandage. The wound was ghastly, a 4-inch gash along his ribs, where Vincent's clumsy stitches had already torn open. It screamed for professional surgical care, but she could at least staunch the bleeding. This is going to hurt, she warned. I've had worse. She believed him. His torso was a map of scars, bullet wounds, knife marks, something that looked like a burn. This was a man forged in fire, one who had survived things that would shatter most people. Clara meticulously cleaned the wound with antiseptic. Matteo didn't flinch, but she noticed his jaw clench, the muscles in his neck tightening. Tell me something, he gritted through clenched teeth. Why'd you really scream that night? Clara threaded the needle, grateful for a focal point beyond his unsettling proximity. I told you. I recognized him. No, I mean, why'd you care? You could have stayed silent. Let me die. Safer for you. She pressed the needle through his skin, beginning the first stitch. Because letting someone die when you can prevent it makes you just as guilty. Philosophical for a waitress. My father was a good man, Clara replied, her hands working with a practiced rhythm reminiscent of anatomy labs and volunteer work. He taught us that silence in the face of evil is its own kind of evil, even if it costs you. Cost you plenty, Matteo observed dryly. Ended up here. Better than living with the knowledge that I could have stopped a murder and didn't. She tied off the first stitch, then started the second. What kind of person would that make me? A smart one? A safe one? A dead one? Inside? Clara cast a quick glance at his face. Where it counts. Something shifted in Matteo's expression. Surprise, perhaps, or a flicker of recognition, as if he finally saw her as a person, not merely a problem. They fell into a comfortable silence as Clara continued her work, her fingers moving with practiced precision, closing the wound stitch by careful stitch. She was close enough to detect the scent of his cologne mingling with blood and antiseptic. Close enough to feel the warmth radiating from his skin. Close enough to notice his intense gaze, a gaze that had nothing to do with pain. You're good at this, he said quietly. I wanted to be a doctor, a surgeon, specifically, Clara murmured, her voice tinged with old sorrow. Guess life had other plans. Life, or my enemies. She tied off the final stitch. Both, maybe. Clara bandaged the wound with fresh gauze, her hands finally steady. When she looked up, Matteo was still watching her, no longer with suspicion, but something else entirely, something that made her breath catch. Thank you, he said, the words sounding foreign on his tongue. You're welcome. Clara peeled off the gloves, suddenly acutely aware of their vulnerability. He, shirtless and wounded. She, close enough to touch, close enough to hurt, close enough to... She abruptly stood. You should rest. No heavy lifting for at least a week. Matteo slowly sat up, wincing. You giving me doctor's orders? Someone has to. Clara moved toward the door, needing distance. You're not invincible, Mr. Vitali. That wound could have killed you. Matteo, he corrected. She turned back. What? Call me Matteo. Mr. Vitali was my father. He methodically buttoned his shirt over the fresh bandages, his eyes never leaving hers. And Clara, Vincent confirmed your story, the dates, the locations, everything. You're telling the truth about your brother. Clara's heart seized. So, I can go home? Matteo's expression darkened. No, because now that I know you're not working with my enemies, I know something else. What? The men who took your brother are the same ones trying to kill me, which means you're not just a witness anymore. He stood, moving closer despite the obvious pain it caused. You're bait, and they'll come for you eventually. Then let me run. They'll find you. Matteo stopped inches away, and Clara realized, with a jolt, that she wasn't afraid anymore. She should have been, but she wasn't. The only place you're safe is here, with me. That's not safety. That's a different kind of cage. Maybe. His voice dropped to a near whisper. But at least in this cage, you're alive. They stood there, the air between them crackling with an unspoken tension, an electric current neither could name. Captor and captive, killer and healer, two people who, by all accounts, shouldn't care about each other, yet somehow did. Go back to your room, Matteo finally said, breaking the spell. But tomorrow, things change. How? You wanted to find your brother. I want to find who's trying to kill me. Tomorrow, we start looking for answers together. Clara awoke the next morning to the jarring sound of shouting. Angry voices reverberated through the mansion. Matteo's, unusually loud, rose above the others, met by equally heated responses. She pressed her ear to the door, straining to catch words, but only snippets reached her. Compromised the entire operation. Should never have brought her here. Your call, boss, but this is on you. The lock clicked. Clara sprang back as the door swung open. Frankie stood there, his face grim. Get dressed. Something's happened. 10 minutes later, Clara stood in Matteo's study, surrounded by a knot of furious men. Matteo sat behind his desk, his face carved from stone. Tommy paced like a caged animal. Vincent stood by the window, his gaze fixed on the grounds, an unusual tension in his posture. 4 other armed men she didn't recognize lined the walls, each radiating fury. On Matteo's desk lay a manila envelope. Tell her, Tommy snarled at Matteo. Tell her what her little rescue mission cost us. Matteo's eyes, cold as ice, met Clara's. Word got out that I survived the hit. My enemies know someone warned me. They've identified you. Clara's blood ran cold. How? The diner has security cameras, Vincent said quietly. Someone hacked the footage. You're visible running into the parking lot screaming. They know exactly who you are. And they know you're here, Tommy added viciously, which means they know the boss is protecting you, which makes us all look weak. Tommy! Matteo's voice cracked like a whip. Enough. But Tommy was relentless. She's brought this entire organization under scrutiny. The Calibri family knows we have her. The Russians are asking questions. Even our own allies are wondering why you're harboring some random waitress. I said enough. Matteo stood, and the room fell silent. He picked up the manila envelope with careful control. This arrived an hour ago, delivered to our front gate by a kid on a bike who got paid $50 and couldn't describe who hired him. He opened the envelope and pulled out a single photograph. Clara's mother, Susan Brennan, walking out of her house in Indianapolis, groceries in hand. A stark red circle had been drawn around her head. Clara's knees buckled. No, no, please. Matteo laid out more photos. Her sister, Emma, leaving class at Indiana State, also circled. Clara's tiny apartment in Chicago, the door marked with a red X. There's a note, Matteo stated flatly and read, hand over the girl by midnight tomorrow, or everyone she loves dies. Following our decisive action, we'll raise every one of your establishments, eliminate every soldier under your command, and leave you hanging lifeless from the Chicago River Bridge. Vitali, your demise should have occurred in that parking lot. Now, prepare to witness the utter collapse of your empire before you meet your end. See, Vincent articulated, for Calibri, This unmistakably heralds from Carlo Calibri himself, the family's patriarch. They're openly declaring war. Over a mere waitress, one of the armed men blurted, incredulous. No, Matteo interjected, his jaw clenched tightly. They're declaring war because I survived their assassination attempt. Clara is merely a pretext. Then surrender her to them, Tommy erupted, his voice strained. Let's minimize our losses. We cannot plunge into a war for the sake of one girl. She saved my life, Matteo retorted, his voice dangerously subdued. And now she's poised to cost us everything. Tommy slammed his fist onto the table. Boss, be pragmatic. One life in exchange for dozens, for the entirety of the organization's existence, is simple arithmetic. Clara felt the room constricting around her, every gaze fixed upon her as if she were a ticking bomb, moments from detonation. Perhaps she was. If you hand me over to them, she began, her voice trembling uncontrollably, will they leave my family unscathed? No, Vincent answered preemptively before Matteo could respond. They'll annihilate you and your family regardless. That's their modus operandi. The threat isn't open for negotiation. It's an inescapable reality. Clara's legs finally buckled beneath her. She collapsed into a chair, the full crushing weight of her actions descending upon her. I condemn them by screaming, by alerting you. I have condemned my own mother and my sister. You haven't condemned anyone, Matteo offered, his tone softening with a touch of unexpected gentleness. The moment they resolved to pursue me, they sealed their own fate. How touching, Tommy sneered, his voice dripping with sarcasm. But it does nothing to resolve our immediate predicament. We have until midnight tomorrow to render a decision. Either relinquish her and project weakness, or retain her and face the calamity of war. There's a third alternative, Frankie volunteered, breaking the tense silence. We relocate her family, ensure their safety, and then fortify our positions here. They'll eventually locate them, Vince countered, shaking his head. The Calibri family possesses extensive resources and connections. Concealing civilians indefinitely is an unrealistic endeavor. Then, what course of action do we pursue? Another man inquired, his voice laced with desperation. All eyes converged upon Matteo. He remained silent, his gaze fixed on the photographs of Clara's family. His hand unconsciously traced the fresh stitches along his ribs, threads Clara herself had sewn when he was at his most vulnerable. Boss, Tommy pressed, his impatience palpable. We require a definitive decision. Matteo's eyes met Clara's across the expansive desk. In that singular moment, she perceived something that profoundly startled her: guilt. This individual, who eliminated without hesitation, who reigned through intimidation and brutal force, now grappled with culpability for the impact his world had wrought upon hers. Retrieve her family, Matteo finally commanded, his voice resolute. Frankie, dispatch our most adept team to Indianapolis immediately. Take Marcus and Leo. Extract the mother and sister. Inform them of a credible threat, but withhold specific details. Bring them here. Boss, that's... Tommy began, his protest abruptly cut short. Not negotiable, Matteo's voice was like tempered steel. Furthermore, I demand every property we own be secured. Double the guard contingent. Recall all personnel from non-essential operations. If Calibri yearns for war, we shall grant him war. Over her? Tommy gestured dismissively at Clara. Over the principle, Matteo corrected him, his voice icy. I refuse to negotiate with those who threaten me. I refuse to surrender individuals under my protection. And I unequivocally refuse to permit anyone to dictate how I manage my organization. He leaned forward, his eyes ablaze with fierce determination. Carlo Calibri attempted to assassinate me and failed. Now, he endeavors to wield fear as a weapon of manipulation. If I yield now, every illicit crew in Chicago will perceive me as weak. Therefore, no, we are not handing her over. Then we are embarking upon a war over a liability, Tommy stated bitterly, his voice infused with resentment. We are embarking upon a war because I choose to, Matteo declared, his voice dropping to a lethally low register. And anyone who disputes that decision may depart at this very instant. But if you choose to remain, you will follow orders. Understood? A profound silence permeated the room. Then, one by one, the men nodded in silent assent. Good. Move out. Matteo rattled off orders with practiced efficiency, seamlessly transitioning from conflicted individual to decisive commander in mere seconds. Frankie, you have 4 hours to reach Indianapolis and return. Vincent, contact our legal counsel. I expect every legitimate business to be fortified. Tommy, coordinate the security lockdown. The room emptied until only Clara and Matteo remained. You should have delivered me to them, Clara whispered, her voice barely audible. My life is not worth a war. That decision is not yours to make. Matteo rounded the desk, standing over her. You preserved my life when you had every justification not to. You sutured my wounds when you could have left me to bleed out. You are not a liability, Clara. You are now my responsibility. I do not wish to be your responsibility. Too late, his voice softened imperceptibly. Your mother and sister will arrive by evening. They will be safe. And tomorrow, when Calibri comes for you, he will encounter an army instead of a victim. Clara gazed up at him, this dangerous man who had irrevocably upended her existence, who had chosen the arduous path of war over the facile acceptance of surrender, and who now regarded her as if she were inherently worth protecting. Why, she questioned, the single word laden with a multitude of unspoken emotions. Why risk everything? Matteo remained silent for a long moment, lost in thought. Because the men who abducted your brother are the identical individuals who attempted to assassinate me. Because you exhibited courage when courage was paramount. And because, he paused, a flicker of something unreadable momentarily crossing his expression. Because I am weary of being solely the man who survives. Perhaps it is time to become the man who saves someone. He turned and walked toward the door, then paused, his hand on the knob. Get some rest. Tomorrow promises to be hell. Clara's mother and sister materialized at sunset, escorted by Frankie and his team. Clara hurtled down the grand staircase as her mother stumbled through the front doors, her eyes wide with a mixture of terror and bewilderment. Emma clung desperately to Susan's arm, both women appearing as though they had been abruptly plunged into a living nightmare. Mom! Clara threw her arms around Susan, embracing her tightly. Clara, what precisely is happening? Susan's voice trembled uncontrollably. These armed men arrived at our house claiming we were in grave danger. They seized you. She pulled back, her hands gripping Clara's shoulders with an unyielding grasp. What entanglement have you become embroiled in? I will explain everything, I promise. You are safe now. Safe? Emma's voice was piercingly shrill. They forcibly removed us from our home. They refused to disclose any information. Clara, are you involved with? She scanned the armed men, then the opulent mansion, her gaze finally resting on Matteo, who stood observing from the study doorway. Oh my God, is that a mob boss? Emma, please! Girls, Susan's voice was firm, despite the fear evident in her eyes. She addressed Matteo directly. I have no comprehension of who you are or the nature of my daughter's involvement, but we are not criminals. We are merely collateral damage, Matteo interjected, stepping forward. His voice was respectful, almost gentle. Mrs. Brennan, your daughter saved my life 4 nights ago. Unfortunately, the individuals who attempted to end my life have now elected to leverage your family to reach her. Susan's face blanched. Saved your life? Clara, what? I'll explain everything, Clara said quickly. But first, let's get both of you settled. Please, Mom. Trust me. An hour later, Clara sat with her mother and sister in a secure guest suite on the 2nd floor. She recounted every detail, the parking lot, the assassins, the kidnapping, and Matteo's subsequent protection. Emma appeared utterly terrified. Susan looked heartbroken. This is because of Antonio, Susan uttered quietly. Isn't it? Those same men? Clara nodded. I recognized one of them, Mom, Vincentiu, the one with the scar. Susan closed her eyes, tears silently tracing paths down her cheeks. We should have abandoned Indianapolis after they took him. Should have fled far away, but I kept clinging to hope. Her voice cracked, dissolving into a choked sob. I kept hoping he would return home. Mrs. Brennan, Vincent Castellano, appeared at the doorway, his expression unusually sympathetic. Mr. Vitali wishes to speak with Clara. It concerns her brother. Clara found Matteo in his study. Documents spread across his desk. He was poring over files, photographs, and financial records. 2 years' worth of investigation into the Calibri family. Sit, he instructed. I need you to recount every detail of the kidnapping once more. Every single one, especially regarding the ransom. Clara sank into the chair. Why? Vincent already... Because I suspect I've overlooked something. Matteo's eyes were intense, piercing. The ransom? You stated your family paid $20,000. Who delivered it? My father? They provided him with an address, an abandoned warehouse on the east side of Indianapolis. He went alone, deposited the money in a duffel bag as instructed, and then... nothing. 3 days passed, no Antonio, no phone call. My father reported it to the police, but they dismissed it as a probable runaway situation, claiming teenage boys disappear all the time. Clara's hands clenched in her lap. We continued to call, continued to search. My father drove to that warehouse every single day for an entire month, desperately hoping for a clue. It utterly destroyed him. 6 months later, he suffered a heart attack. The doctor attributed it to stress. Matteo produced a photograph, an abandoned, graffiti-covered warehouse. This one? Clara's breath caught in her throat. Yes. How did you... Because I am familiar with that warehouse. Matteo's jaw tightened. It is owned by a shell company. I've been tracking it for 2 years, trying to ascertain its true controller. The trail consistently went cold. What does that signify? It signifies that your brother's kidnapping was not a random occurrence. Matteo spread out more documents across the desk. Carlo Calibri doesn't engage in petty extortion in Indiana. His operations are high-level, protection rackets, gambling, money laundering. He wouldn't squander his time extorting 20 grand from a struggling restaurant. Then why? Unless it wasn't about the money. Matteo pulled out another file. 2 years ago, Carlo Calibri was actively consolidating his power. He was eliminating rivals, absorbing smaller operations, building an empire, but he required leverage against someone. Clara's stomach churned with a sense of dread. Leverage? My father's restaurant? Who supplied your meat and produce? The question seemed arbitrary, disconnected. A distributor named Marino Foods. They were local, family-owned. Why? Matteo's expression darkened perceptibly. Because Marino Foods was a front company for the Genovese crew, a smaller family that controlled certain territories within Indiana. They were rivals to Calibri, and he desired their removal. Clara's mind raced, desperately attempting to connect the disjointed pieces of information. I fail to comprehend. What bearing does that have on Antonio? Everything. Matteo leaned forward, his gaze intense. Consider this, Clara. A 17-year-old kid who works at a restaurant supplied by a rival organization. A kid who might have observed things. Deliveries, changing hands with faces she didn't recognize, and items that could easily serve as evidence. Antonio had remained silent about what he witnessed, perhaps not even grasping the gravity of what unfolded before him. Matteo's voice grew urgent as he explained, "But Calibris would have known." He continued, "He abducts your brother, extorts money from your father, who then pays, and Antonio vanishes without a trace. No body was ever recovered." A sickening realization washed over Clara. "You believe Calibris took Antonio because of what he might have seen?" "I believe Calibris seized Antonio to wield him against the Genovese family," Matteo asserted. "Perhaps as proof he could infiltrate their operations, or as a bargaining chip to compel their cooperation, or even as a stark warning." Matteo's fists clenched. 6 months after your brother's disappearance, the Genovese crew crumbled. Their leadership faced federal charges, racketeering, murder, fraud. Someone had turned state's evidence. Clara gasped. "You think... Antonio?" "I suspect your brother might have been coerced into testifying," Matteo conceded. "Or perhaps he uncovered something so devastating that Calibris used it to dismantle his adversaries." Matteo met her gaze directly. "Regardless, he wasn't murdered for ransom. He was captured as a pawn in a war you were entirely oblivious to." Clara's world reeled. For years she had believed Antonio perished because her father couldn't secure enough money, couldn't do enough. But if Matteo's theory held true, if Antonio indeed testified, if he provided evidence, where could he be now? Witness protection, perhaps, she mused, or dead, having become a liability. Matteo's tone softened. I don't have the answers, Clara, but what I do know is Carlo Calibris operates with a consistent pattern. He manipulates civilians as leverage, then discards them. He did it to your family, he's attempting to do it to you, and he's been doing it for years. How many people? Clara whispered, her voice barely audible. More than I can count, Matteo replied, rising and moving to the window. I've spent 3 years attempting to build a case against him. Each time I draw near, evidence vanishes, witnesses disappear. The man seems untouchable because he's incredibly cunning. He exploits people's families against them, enforcing compliance through terror. He turned back to her, a new intensity in his eyes. But you're different, Clara. You don't fear him. You're fueled by anger. You demand answers about your brother, and you just might be the key to his downfall. How? She asked, a flicker of hope igniting within her. Because you recognized Vincent Russo, Matteo explained. Because you can identify faces, locations, and details that could link to other victims. His eyes blazed with an emotion Clara hadn't witnessed before. Hope. You're not merely a liability, you're a witness. And if we can locate others like you, individuals who have endured Calibris's operations, we might finally amass enough to obliterate him. Clara rose, her legs unsteady, yet her resolve solidified. If there's any chance Antonio is alive, then we find him. Together, Matteo vowed. But first, we must survive tomorrow. When Calibris comes for you, we will demonstrate that he chose the wrong family to terrorize. For the first time since that harrowing night in the parking lot, Clara experienced something beyond fear. She felt purpose. The assault began at 3 a.m., hours before Calibris's midnight deadline. Clara was awake, perched in the third-floor window seat, observing the estate grounds bathed in the glow of security lights. Sleep was an impossibility, knowing what the morning portended. Her mother and Emma finally rested in the adjacent suite, exhausted from weeping and unanswerable questions. She nearly missed the movement amidst the trees, a fleeting shadow, then another, purposefully advancing toward the mansion's east wing. Clara's heart seized. She dashed to the door, pounding furiously. "Frankie! Tommy! Someone!" The door burst open. Tommy stood there, his gun already drawn. "What?" "There are men outside, in the trees, heading toward the house." Tommy's expression hardened. He seized his radio. "Possible breach, east perimeter, all units." The window behind Clara exploded. Glass shards sprayed inward as a grappling hook tore through, embedding itself in the wall. Tommy shoved Clara to the floor as gunfire erupted from outside. Bullets ripped through the room, splintering wood and shredding furniture. "Stay down!" Tommy roared, returning fire through the shattered window, his shots precise and controlled. Alarms shrieked throughout the mansion. Shouts reverberated from below, Matteo's men mobilizing, but the attackers had orchestrated their timing flawlessly. They had meticulously surveyed the estate, pinpointed its vulnerabilities, and struck precisely where they knew Clara would be. A figure swung through the broken window, masked and armed, moving with military precision. Tommy turned to engage, but a second assailant followed closely behind the first. They flanked him, professional and ruthless. Clara scrambled backward as the brutal fight erupted. Tommy felled one attacker with a brutal close-quarters shot, but the second crashed into him, sending them sprawling to the floor in a chaotic tangle of limbs and violence. More grappling hooks impacted the mansion. They weren't merely coming for Clara, they were initiating a full-scale assault. Clara bolted for the door, but a third attacker materialized in the hallway, blocking her escape. He was monumental, 6 feet 4 inches of raw muscle and menace, his face obscured by a black mask. "Target acquired," he announced into his radio. "Third floor, east wing." Clara retreated into the room as he advanced. Behind her, Tommy struggled, losing ground. The other attacker had him pinned, relentlessly choking him with a strap from his own rifle. The massive man seized Clara's arm with crushing force. "Carlos sends his regards." Panic coursed through Clara's veins. She was going to die. Her family was going to die. Everything Matteo had promised was disintegrating. No. Something within Clara snapped. She had spent 2 years as a victim, 4 days as a captive, and her entire life watching wicked men take what they desired. Not anymore. Clara's free hand shot out, grasping a heavy crystal lamp from a side table. She swung it with every ounce of her strength, smashing it against the man's masked head. The lamp shattered, crystal and blood flying. The man staggered, his grip loosening. Clara swung again, this time with the lamp's base, connecting with his temple. He collapsed like a stone. Behind her, Tommy remained trapped, his face purpling. His attacker didn't anticipate Clara's arrival until she brought the lamp base crashing down on his skull. Once, twice. The man released Tommy and slumped sideways. Tommy gasped for air, clutching his throat. Jesus! The door exploded inward. Matteo burst through, accompanied by Frankie and 3 other guards, guns raised. He instantly assessed the scene. 2 attackers neutralized, Tommy barely conscious, and Clara standing over them with a bloodied lamp, trembling but alive. "Clear the floor!" Matteo barked. "Frankie, get Mrs. Brennan and Emma to the safe room, now!" More gunfire erupted from below. The mansion had transformed into a war zone. Matteo grasped Clara's shoulders. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head, unable to articulate a response. "She saved my life," Tommy croaked from the floor. "Hit them with a lamp, both of them." Matteo's eyes widened, a fleeting expression of shock crossing his face, followed by something akin to respect. "Can you walk?" "Yes." "Then stay close to me." He maintained a reassuring hand on her arm as they moved into the hallway. Bodies lay scattered in the corridor, some of Matteo's men, more attackers. The assault was coordinated and brutal. They reached the main staircase just as a group of masked gunmen surged up from the first floor. Matteo fired with chilling precision, each shot finding its target. Frankie covered the left flank. Clara pressed against the wall, her heart pounding, the lamp still clutched in her bloody hands. "South entrance is breached," someone shouted over the radio. "They're trying to flank." An explosion rocked the mansion. The lights flickered and died, emergency generators kicking in seconds later with a dim red glow. "They're trying to cut the power completely," Vincent's voice crackled through Matteo's radio. "Get to the safe room. They're going to storm the building." But Matteo wasn't retreating. Clara saw it in his eyes, the calculation, the raw fury. He had been driven into a corner, and cornered predators were the most dangerous. "How many?" Matteo demanded into the radio. 12 confirmed, maybe more outside. Positions, 4 down, 8 active, scattered across first and second floors. Matteo's jaw tightened. He looked at Clara, then at his men. "Frankie, take Clara to the safe room with her family. Vincent, coordinate defense from the control room. Everyone else with me. We end this now." "Boss, they outnumber us," one guard began. "I don't care." Matteo's voice was ice and steel. "They invaded my house, attempted to seize someone under my protection. They won't leave here breathing." He started down the stairs, and his men followed without hesitation, loyal to the end. Clara grasped his arm. "Wait, let me help." Matteo turned, and for a fleeting moment, she glimpsed beyond the ruthless boss to the man beneath. "You've already helped enough. That lamp—" A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "That was impressive, but this is my world now. Let me handle it." "Those men want me," Clara insisted. "If I hide, your people die protecting me." "That's their job," Matteo responded. His hand briefly covered hers. "And mine is keeping you alive, whatever I have to do." Another explosion, closer this time. Windows shattered somewhere below. "Go," Matteo said firmly. "Frankie will protect you. And Clara—" He paused at the top of the stairs. "Thank you for Tommy, for choosing to fight." Then he vanished into the chaos, and Clara realized with startling clarity that she no longer feared for herself. She feared for him. Frankie pulled her toward the safe room, but Clara looked back one last time. Through the smoke and gunfire, she saw Matteo moving like a force of nature, precise, lethal, unstoppable, and she finally understood why his enemies feared him. Dawn broke over the Vitali estate, painting the destruction in hues of gold and blood. Clara stood in the doorway of the safe room, surveying the aftermath. Bullet holes scarred the walls, shattered glass covered the marble floors, and furniture lay overturned and broken. 3 of Matteo's guards were dead, 5 more wounded, yet all 12 attackers were gone, some deceased, others captured and taken to the basement for interrogation. Matteo had triumphed, but barely. She discovered him in his study, standing with his back to the door, gazing out the window. His shirt was ripped and stained with blood, much of it not his own. His knuckles were raw and split. He clutched a glass of whiskey, yet hadn't taken a sip. "You should be resting," Clara murmured softly. "So should you," he replied, not turning around. "Your mother and sister, they're terrified but unharmed. Frankie secured them in a reinforced suite with a pair of guards." Clara stepped further into the room. "Matteo, I'm so sorry. This is my fault. If I hadn't—" "Don't." He finally turned, and Clara saw exhaustion etched deep into every line of his face. "Calibris chose this, not you. He attacked my home, killed my men. This is war now, and wars have casualties. 3 men died protecting me. 3 men died protecting what's mine. There's a difference." Matteo placed the untouched whiskey glass down. Vincent interrogated one of the survivors. "They weren't supposed to kill you, just seize you and retreat. Calibris wants you alive." Clara's blood ran cold. "Why?" "Because you're a symbol now, the waitress who defied him. If he parades you before the other families and shows them I couldn't protect you, it shatters my reputation." Matteo's voice was laced with bitterness. "In my world, perception is paramount. Power is meaningless without fear and respect." "Then hand me over to him," Clara heard herself say again, despite knowing its futility. "End this before more people die." "No, Matteo. I said no." He moved closer, his eyes ablaze. "You know what I realized during that fight? When I saw you standing over those attackers, lamp in hand, covered in blood, still breathing." He stopped mere inches from her. "You're not a liability. You're a fighter, and fighters are incredibly valuable." Clara's breath hitched at their close proximity. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying we stop pretending you're just an innocent waitress I'm protecting out of obligation." Matteo's voice dropped lower. "You want to find your brother? I want to dismantle Carlo Calibris. Our objectives align, an alliance, a partnership." Matteo extended his hand. "You give me everything you know, every single detail, every face, every memory that could help me build a case against Calibris. In return, I'll leverage my resources, my connections, my entire organization to uncover what happened to Antonio." Clara stared at his outstretched hand. This was madness. Partnering with a mafia boss to investigate her brother's disappearance meant delving deeper into a world she had spent her entire life meticulously avoiding, but that world had already swallowed her whole. She took his hand. "Deal." Matteo's grip was firm, warm. "Then we begin now. Vincent has files on every known Calibris operation from the past 5 years. We'll go through everything. Look for patterns, connections to your brother's case. What if we don't find anything? Then we make him tell us." Matteo's smile was dangerous. "One of those attackers in my basement used to work directly for Carlo. By tonight, he'll divulge everything he knows." Clara should have been horrified by the implication. Instead, she felt a dark, unsettling satisfaction. They spent the next 4 hours immersed in files. Vincent joined them, bringing boxes of documents, surveillance photographs, and financial records. Clara's eyes burned from reading, but she pushed through, desperate for anything familiar. "Wait." She pulled out a photograph. A restaurant in Indianapolis, not her family's place. "I know this building. It's 2 blocks from Papa Giovanni's. They opened right after we closed." Vincent checked his notes. "Russo's Bistro, opened 18 months ago by Vincent Russo's cousin, Anthony Russo. It's a legitimate business on paper, but we suspect it's a money laundering front." "They replaced us," Clara said bitterly. "Drove us out of business and took our location's customer base. Not just you." Matteo spread out more photos. 7 family restaurants in Indianapolis closed in the same 6-month period, all replaced by Calibris-connected establishments. It's a pattern. Squeeze out the independents, then move in their own operations. Clara's mind raced. Antonio worked every shift he could. He was always trying to help with bills. What if? She looked up sharply. What if he saw something at one of those other restaurants? Maybe he made deliveries or helped a friend whose family was also being targeted. That would make him a witness to multiple extortion cases. Vincent's eyes gleamed. That's leverage. Real leverage. Matteo grabbed his phone. "Vincent, pull records on every restaurant that closed in that time frame. Employee lists, delivery schedules, everything. Cross-reference with Antonio Brennan's name." As Vincent worked, Matteo turned to Clara. Tell me about Antonio's friends. Anyone he was close to, anyone who might have known what he was involved in? Clara thought back. His best friend was Marcus Chen. His family owned a Chinese restaurant, Golden Dragon. I think they closed around the same time we did. Marcus was devastated. Where is Marcus now? I don't know. We lost touch after... Clara's throat tightened. After Antonio disappeared, I couldn't face his friends. Couldn't face anyone. We find Marcus Chen. Matteo made a note. If he and Antonio were close, he might know something. They worked through the afternoon and into the evening, pieces slowly interlocking. Clara felt something shifting between them, the initial suspicion fading, replaced by a mutual respect. Matteo listened to her insights without dismissing them. She watched him work with fierce intelligence, seeing past the killer to the astute strategist beneath. Around 8 p.m., Vincent burst back into the study. Found something. Antonio Brennan made 3 deposits into his family's restaurant account in the month before he disappeared. $500 each time. $8,500 total. Clara's heart stopped. That's impossible. He didn't have that kind of money. He made minimum wage. Exactly. Vincent's expression was grim. So where did it come from? Matteo and Clara exchanged looks. Someone paid him, Clara whispered, to do something, or keep quiet about something, or testify about something, Matteo added. The FBI pays informants, so do rival families, so do people trying to build cases against their enemies. Clara's hands shook. Antonio was 17. He would if it meant saving his family's restaurant. Matteo's voice was gentle. Scared kids do desperate things, Clara. Trust me, I know. For a moment, vulnerability flickered across his face. Clara saw the boy he must have been, young, scared, forced into a brutal world too early. We'll find the truth, she said, and realized she believed it. Matteo nodded. Together. It wasn't friendship, not yet, but standing there surrounded by evidence and a shared purpose, Clara felt something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. 3 days of relentless searching yielded a breakthrough and complications no one expected. Vincent tracked down Marcus Chen in Gary, Indiana, where he was working at his uncle's restaurant. When Matteo and Clara arrived to question him, Marcus took one look at Clara and broke down sobbing. I tried to stop him, Marcus sobbed in a back office while his uncles served customers. I told Antonio it was too dangerous, but he wouldn't listen. He said it was the only way to save your family. Clara's hands gripped the table. Stop him from what, Marcus? From working with that FBI agent, the one who kept showing up asking questions about the Calibris deliveries. Marcus wiped his eyes. Antonio saw things, Clara. At my family's restaurant, at yours, at others. He saw men counting money in back rooms, saw packages that weren't food being delivered. He figured out what was happening, that all our families were being used for money laundering. Matteo leaned forward. He went to the FBI? The FBI came to him, some agent named Harper. She said they were building a RICO case against organized crime in Indiana, and Antonio's testimony could help. Marcus's voice dropped. Antonio thought if he cooperated, if he gave them evidence, the FBI would protect your family, would make the Calibris people leave you alone. Clara felt like she'd been punched. So, he testified? He was going to. Agent Harper said she'd put him in witness protection after the grand jury testimony, but then... Marcus's voice broke. Then he disappeared. 2 days before he was supposed to testify, they grabbed him outside our restaurant. I was there, Clara. I saw the van. Saw Vincent Russo drag him inside. I called 911, but by the time police came, they were gone. The room spun. Clara gripped Matteo's arm for support, and his hand immediately covered hers, steadying, grounding. Did you tell the FBI? Matteo asked. Yes, but Agent Harper said there was nothing they could do without a body. She said, sometimes witnesses get cold feet and run. Marcus looked at Clara with haunted eyes. But Antonio wouldn't run. He was doing this for you, for your family. He loved you so much. The dam inside Clara finally broke. She stood abruptly and walked out of the office, through the restaurant, and into the cold February air. Tears streamed down her face, 2 years of guilt and grief pouring out at once. Matteo followed her into the parking lot. Clara, he died because of me. Her voice was raw. Because I needed a hero. Because our family was drowning, and I kept crying about it where Antonio could hear. He was 17 years old, and he tried to save us, and they murdered him for it. You didn't know. I should have. Clara spun to face him. I was his older sister. I should have protected him. Should have seen he was involved in something dangerous. Should have... She choked on a sob. God, Matteo. He must have been so scared. And I wasn't there. Matteo pulled her against his chest, and Clara collapsed into him, her tears soaking his shirt, his arms wrapped around her, strong, protective, surprisingly gentle. Listen to me, he said quietly. Antonio made his choice. A brave choice. A stupid choice, maybe, but his own. You can't carry that guilt. How do you know? Clara's voice was muffled against him. Because I've carried it. Matteo's arms tightened. Every individual I've lost, every soldier who fell under my command, every civilian caught in the crossfire, I once believed I could control every outcome, safeguard everyone. Yet, that's an illusion. Your only recourse is to honor their memory by enduring. Clara leaned back just enough to truly see his face. For the first time, his emotional guard was entirely absent. She perceived profound agony there, a stark loneliness, an abyss of isolation. She recognized it instantly because she mirrored that very sentiment. You're not at all what I envisioned, she whispered. And what did you envision? He asked. A monster. I am a monster, Matteo declared, his voice laden with a chilling truth. But even monsters have origins. My father was murdered when I was 19, betrayed by his own lieutenant for a promotion with a rival family. I inherited an empire on the brink of collapse, with adversaries circling like sharks. I faced two stark choices, become ruthless enough to survive or perish. So, you chose survival. I chose loneliness. His voice was barely perceptible now. In my sphere, everyone is either an asset or a threat. One cannot trust, cannot show vulnerability, cannot allow anyone to draw near, for they will surely exploit it. I've been utterly alone for 15 years. Clara, surrounded by people, also experienced this profound solitude. Clara's hand instinctively rose to his face, her thumb tracing the sharp line of his jaw. You are not alone in this moment. The atmosphere between them shifted, crackling with a dangerous electric energy. Matteo's eyes darkened as he gazed at her, genuinely seeing her, past the waitress, past the witness, to the woman beneath. Clara, he uttered, his voice rough with emotion. Whatever this is, it's a terrible idea. Why? Because I destroy everything I touch, because my world spills the blood of innocence, because you undeniably deserve better than this. She silenced him with a kiss, desperate and fierce, a convergence of two broken souls seeking solace in the encroaching darkness. Matteo responded immediately, his hand tangling in her hair, intensifying the kiss with a breath-stealing ferocity. Clara felt vibrantly alive for the first time in years, terrified yet exhilarated, completely untethered from everything she had ever known. When they finally broke apart, both gasping for breath, Matteo rested his forehead against hers. This complicates things, he murmured. Everything is already complicated, she offered, a slight smile touching her lips. Fair point. Their drive back to Chicago was enveloped in a charged silence, their hands intertwined across the center console. However, as they passed through the estate gates, Clara noticed Frankie and Tommy observing them from the entrance, their faces etched with acute concern. Inside, the whispers had already begun. The boss is distracted, she overheard one guard grumble to another. He spent 3 days fixated on the girl instead of pressing business. Calibris is still at large, Tommy sharply reminded Frankie in the hallway. We lost 3 men, and instead of planning retaliation, he's playing detective for her brother. He's invested, Frankie responded cautiously. He's compromised. Tommy's voice was harsh, devoid of subtlety. I've worked for him for 8 years. I've never seen him like this. That girl has gotten into his head, and it's going to get us all killed. Clara's stomach churned with dread. She pulled Matteo aside before they reached his study. Your men believe I'm distracting you. They worry excessively. Are they correct? Matteo regarded her, his expression a conflict of emotions. Yes, but I don't care. He gently cupped her face. For 15 years, every decision I've made has been driven by strategy, by power, by sheer survival. For once, I'm making a choice based on something entirely different. What? You. His thumb tenderly brushed her cheek. And before you object, I know it's reckless. I know it makes me vulnerable. But, Clara, you make me remember what it feels like to be human, to care about something beyond empire and vengeance. Clara's heart ached with a bittersweet understanding. Matteo, I know this cannot endure. I know that eventually reality will crush whatever this is, but until then, he pressed a soft kiss to her forehead. Let me be distracted. Let me be weak. Let me feel something other than emptiness. She should have been more astute, should have recognized the inherent peril of falling for a man whose world was cemented in violence. But standing there, amidst the cool shadows of his opulent mansion, Clara realized she was already irrevocably falling, and she possessed no desire to halt her descent. The shocking discovery materialized at midnight when sleep refused to claim Clara. She had left her suite to fetch water from the kitchen, moving stealthily through the darkened mansion. As she passed Matteo's study, she distinctly heard voices, low, urgent, and tinged with anger. I'm telling you, the numbers don't reconcile. Vincent's voice, sharp with accusation, cut through the silence. Someone tipped off Calibri about your schedule that night at the diner. Only 4 individuals knew you would be there. My innermost circle. Matteo's voice, deathly calm, replied, You, Tommy, Frankie, and Marco. Marco's deceased. That leaves the 3 of us. You suspect betrayal within my circle? The temperature in the room seemed to plummet. I suspect someone has been feeding information to Calibri for months. The failed shipment in October, the warehouse raid in December, the assassination attempt. Vincent's voice hardened. Too many coincidences, Matteo. Someone close to you desires your demise. Clara pressed herself against the wall, her heart hammering a frantic rhythm against her ribs. A traitor. One of the very men she had implicitly trusted with her life. Retrieve all financial records for everyone, Matteo commanded. Bank accounts, properties, every scrap of information. If someone is being compensated, I will expose them. Already done, Vincent stated, a rustle of papers accompanying his words. I've unearthed something rather intriguing. 3 offshore accounts linked to shell companies, payments totaling $500,000 over the past year. Whose? Vincent's subsequent words sent a chill through Clara's veins, congealing her blood. Tommy Rosini. A tense silence descended. Then, No, Tommy has been with me for 8 years. He saved my life in Detroit. He would never. The evidence is irrefutable. Payments precisely coincide with every failed operation. And there's additional information. Vincent's voice dropped to a near whisper. I traced the shell company ownership. It's registered to the same corporation that owned that warehouse in Indianapolis. The very warehouse where Clara's family had left the ransom money. Clara's hand flew to her mouth, stifling an involuntary gasp. Tommy was implicated in Antonio's kidnapping. Matteo's voice was lethal, a promise of swift retribution. I believe Tommy has been collaborating with Calibri for years. The kidnapping, the assassination attempt, everything. He's been positioning himself to seize control of your organization once you're dead. Where is he now? He should be on patrol, East Wing, 2nd shift. Bring him to me quietly. And Vincent, a loaded pause. If he resists, eliminate him. Clara heard movement. Then the study door swung open. She flattened herself further into a doorway as Vincent hurried past, already radioing for backup. She should have retreated to her room, should have remained uninvolved. Instead, she crept closer to the study. Through the narrow crack in the door, she observed Matteo standing at his desk, his gaze fixed on the incriminating evidence, betrayal etched into every line of his face. Then, she heard footsteps behind her. Just a heartbeat earlier, Pop had been a fool. Clara spun around just as Tommy appeared at the end of the hallway, a gun clutched in his hand. But he was not alone. 3 other guards flanked him, men Clara did not recognize, their expressions cold and overtly hostile. Well, Tommy's smile was vicious, menacing. The little waitress sneaking around where she doesn't belong. Did you overhear something interesting, Clara? She instinctively moved backward, toward the sanctuary of the study. Matteo! Tommy fired. The bullet struck the wall mere inches from Clara's head, and she screamed. Matteo burst through the study door, his weapon raised, instantly assessing the dire situation. Tommy and his men, Clara caught defenseless between them. Tommy! Matteo's voice was pure, chilling ice. Lower the weapon. Can't do that, boss. Tommy's smile widened, devoid of warmth. You see, I have new employers now. Better paying, a more promising future. Carlo Calibris extends his regards. You orchestrated the assassination. I did. It would have succeeded too if this had not interfered. Tommy gestured dismissively at Clara with his gun. But that's perfectly fine. Calibris wants her alive anyway. And he wants dead. You killed Marco, my driver, my friend. Collateral damage. Tommy shrugged indifferently. Nothing personal, purely business. You helped abduct a 17-year-old boy. Matteo's voice quivered with barely contained rage. Antonio Brennan, you were there. Tommy laughed, a harsh, humorless sound. That was merely practice. Calibris wanted to test his Indianapolis operations, and some restaurant kid made a convenient target. A shame the FBI reached him first, though. He would have made excellent bargaining leverage. Clara's world seemed to tilt precariously. Antonio went to the FBI, and we discovered... Tommy's eyes gleamed with malicious satisfaction. I intercepted him before he could testify. Calibris initially wanted him dead, but I convinced him the kid held more value alive. Leverage against federal witnesses. He's been rotting in a black site for 2 years. He's alive? Clara's voice was a fragile whisper. For now. Tommy's smile was unremittingly cruel. But after tonight, after Matteo is dead, and I assume control of this organization, he's next. Can't leave any loose ends, can we? You will not lay a hand on him, Matteo growled, his voice a low, dangerous rumble. You won't be alive to prevent me. Tommy nodded to his men. They simultaneously raised their weapons. Clara witnessed it unfold in agonizing slow motion. 4 guns aimed directly at Matteo, fingers tightening on triggers. She moved without conscious thought, throwing herself sideways into Matteo just as the gunfire erupted. They hit the ground together, bullets tearing through the space where Matteo had stood moments before. Clara felt a searing pain across her shoulder, but she ignored it, rolling behind a massive marble column as Matteo returned fire with deadly precision. One of Tommy's men crumpled to the ground, then another. But the third guard managed to strike Matteo in the side, and Clara saw a crimson stain bloom across his shirt. "Matteo!" she gasped, grabbing him as he stumbled. "I'm fine," he gritted out, firing again. The third guard fell. Tommy ducked behind a corner, frantically reloading. "Should have remained loyal, boss. Carlo is going to bestow everything upon me. Your territory, your money, your power. You'll have to kill me first." Matteo advanced, despite the blood gushing from his side. "That's precisely the plan." Tommy swung around the corner, his gun raised, but Frankie appeared suddenly behind him, his own weapon pressed firmly against Tommy's skull. "Drop it!" Frankie snarled, his voice venomous. Tommy froze instantly. "Frankie, I can offer you a share. You murdered Marco. You attempted to kill our boss. You are a dead man." Sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder with each passing second. More guards thundered down the hallways, Vincent leading the charge. Tommy's expression twisted into a mask of pure hatred. "This is not over. Calibris has others embedded within your organization. You will never truly know whom to trust." Frankie pulled the trigger. "Stay with me. Please, Clara," Matteo pleaded, his voice a strained whisper as he crumpled, the hallway falling into a stunned silence broken only by his ragged breaths. Clara, pressing her hands against the crimson gush from his wound, fought back tears. "I'm here. Your brother, he's alive. We'll find him together. But first, you have to survive." Her voice choked as tears streamed down her face. "Don't you dare die on me, Matteo. Petoli." His blood-slicked hand found hers. "Wasn't planning to. Not when I finally found someone worth living for." Then his eyes rolled back, and he collapsed. "Medic!" Clara shrieked. "Someone get a doctor now!" As guards swarmed and Vincent barked into his phone, Clara held Matteo's unconscious form, making a silent, fierce vow. She would find her brother, destroy Carlo Calibris, and ensure Matteo survived to witness it, whatever the cost. Matteo, sustained by sheer, stubborn will, clung to life after surgery. The bullet, miraculously, had missed vital organs by mere millimeters, yet he had lost a life-threatening amount of blood. For 3 agonizing days, a private surgeon battled for his life, as Matteo drifted in and out of consciousness, plagued by feverish dreams. Clara became a permanent fixture by his bedside, ignoring Vincent's pleas to rest, her mother's entreaties to eat, and the hushed whispers of guards who believed her efforts futile. She sat, clutching Matteo's hand, willing him to live. On the 4th day his eyes fluttered open. "Clara," he rasped, his voice barely audible. Leaning in, relief washing over her, she whispered, "I'm here. You're going to be okay." "Tommy's dead," he continued. "Frankie killed him." Clara squeezed his hand. "Vincent's been investigating Tommy's connections, found evidence of 2 other Calibri informants in your organization. They've been dealt with." Matteo, attempting to sit up, gasped in pain. "Don't," Clara gently urged, pushing him back. "The doctor said you need at least 2 weeks of rest." "Don't have 2 weeks," Matteo's eyes, fierce despite his weakness, locked onto hers. "Tommy said Antonio's alive in a black site. We need to find him before Calibris moves him, or—" He trailed off, unable to finish. "I know," Clara's voice was steel, "and we will, but first, you need to heal. Matteo, I spent 3 days stitching you back together. I'm not letting you die from stubbornness." She stood, adjusting a pillow with practiced efficiency. "So rest, build your strength, and when you can stand without bleeding, we'll go get my brother." Over the following week, Clara remained Matteo's constant companion and unofficial nurse, changing bandages, monitoring vitals, and coaxing him to eat when appetite eluded him. She read reports, helping Vincent coordinate operations from the bedroom. As Matteo slowly mended, a profound connection deepened between them, forged in shared blood, unwavering trust, and exposed vulnerability. On the 10th day, Matteo stood unassisted. "I'm ready," he declared. Vincent, working tirelessly, had used Tommy's phone records and financial data to pinpoint Calibris's operations, finally locating a warehouse complex in Hammond, Indiana, 30 miles outside Chicago. Satellite imagery revealed heavy security, unusual activity, and temperature signatures indicative of an underground facility. "That's where they're keeping high-value detainees," Vincent explained, spreading maps across Matteo's desk. "Antonio's there, I'm certain." Matteo studied the layout. "Fortified. 12 guards minimum, maybe more inside. This isn't a snatch and grab, this is a war." "Then we go to war," Clara announced from the doorway, drawing all eyes. Dressed in dark jeans and a black jacket, her hair pulled back, her expression resolute. "Absolutely not," Matteo immediately responded. "This is a combat operation. For my brother, I'm coming. Clara, you could be killed, and he could be dead by the time you get there." Her voice rose. "Matteo, please, I've waited 2 years. I need to be there. I need to see him." Matteo gazed at her, this woman who had saved his life twice, who had refused to abandon him in his darkest hour, who had, against all odds, become the most important person in his world. "You stay behind me at all times," he finally conceded. "You follow orders, and at the first sign of serious trouble, Frankie pulls you out. Understood?" Clara nodded. "Understood." They moved at 3 a.m., a convoy of 3 vehicles carrying Matteo's elite fighters. Frankie drove the lead car, with Clara and Matteo. The assault was planned with military precision. Vincent had bribed a security company employee for the warehouse's electronic codes, granting them a crucial 15-minute window. Before law enforcement response, it had to be enough. They parked a block away and approached on foot. The warehouse loomed against the night sky, dark and menacing. Matteo gave hand signals, and his men fanned out, taking positions. "Cameras disabled," Vincent whispered through the radio. "You're clear." They moved like ghosts. Frankie cut the lock on a side entrance, and they slipped inside, entering a labyrinth of corridors and storage rooms, reeking of rust and fear. The first guard perished silently, Matteo's knife finding his throat before he could utter a sound. The second managed a choked warning before Frankie silenced him. Then, an alarm shrieked. "So much for stealth," Matteo growled. "Go loud. Find the basement level." Gunfire erupted. Matteo's team engaged Calibri's guards with ruthless efficiency, while Clara, heart pounding, stayed close to Frankie. This was real combat violent, chaotic, a stark contrast to any cinematic portrayal. They fought through 2 levels, leaving a trail of bodies. Finally, they found stairs descending into darkness. Basement, Frankie confirmed. Has to be. They descended into a concrete corridor lined with steel-doored cells. Clara's stomach churned. How many souls were imprisoned here? Antonio! She screamed. Antonio Brennan! Clara! A voice, weak but unmistakable, echoed. Clara! She ran towards the sound, Matteo and Frankie flanking her. 3rd door on the left, padlocked, reinforced. Stand back! Matteo fired 3 shots, obliterating the lock mechanism. Frankie kicked the door open. The cell was tiny, filthy, barely lit, and huddled in the corner, thin, beaten but alive, was Antonio. Oh my God! Clara rushed forward, dropping to her knees. Antonio! Antonio! It's me! Her brother looked up, his hollow eyes filled with disbelief. This isn't real. You're not real. They keep showing me things. I'm real, Clara insisted, grasping his scarred, shaking hands. I'm here. I found you. We're getting you out. Antonio collapsed into her arms, sobbing, 2 years of torture and isolation finally breaking apart. Clara held him, tears streaming down her face, barely comprehending his survival. We need to move, Matteo said gently. Clara, can he walk? I think so. She helped Antonio stand. He was so gaunt, so broken. Rage, fiery and consuming, ignited through her grief. Calibris had done this. He had stolen 2 years of her brother's life. Can you tell us anything? Matteo asked Antonio. About who kept you here, what they wanted? Antonio's eyes suddenly focused on Matteo with recognition. You're Matteo, Vitali, Tommy Rossini said. He stopped, confused. He said you'd never find me, that you didn't care about civilians. Tommy's dead, Matteo stated flatly. And he was wrong. They made it halfway back to the stairs before an explosion rocked the building. The ceiling collapsed, separating Clara and Antonio from Matteo and the others. Dust and debris filled the air, and through it, Clara saw a figure approaching, tall, silver-haired, an expensive suit now covered in grime. Carlo Calibris emerged from the smoke like a demon. Well, well, he sneered, his gun aimed at Clara's head. Matteo Vitali's little waitress, you've caused me considerable trouble. Behind the rubble, Clara heard Matteo shouting her name, but he couldn't reach her, not in time. Let them go, Clara commanded, stepping in front of her broken brother. You want someone? Take me. Calibris smiled coldly. Oh, I intend to, but first... He raised his gun towards Antonio. I'm eliminating my mistakes. Clara closed her eyes, bracing for the inevitable. Then gunfire erupted, not from Calibris, but from behind him. Calibri spun towards the shots, but Matteo was already through the smoke, blood seeping through his bandages, his aim perfect. The bullet struck Calibri in the shoulder, spinning him sideways and sending his gun clattering to the floor. You should have killed me when you had the chance, Matteo said, advancing with cold fury. Frankie and 3 other guards emerged behind him, weapons trained on Calibris's men, who had been lurking in the shadows. This isn't over, Vitali! Calibris clutched his bleeding shoulder. It is! Matteo's gun never wavered. You orchestrated an assassination attempt, attacked my home, kidnapped and tortured a 17-year-old kid, planted traitors in my organization. His voice dropped to something lethal. You made this personal. Kill me, and the other families will come for you. Let them try. Matteo glanced at Clara and Antonio, ensuring their safety. But you don't get a quick death. You get federal prison, witness testimony, RICO charges, every crime documented and proven. You'll die behind bars, forgotten and powerless. Calibris's face went white. You're turning me over to the feds? Agent Harper has been very cooperative. Matteo smiled without warmth. Turns out she's been wanting to nail you for years. When I offered her Antonio's testimony, plus evidence of your black site operations, she was more than willing to make a deal. You're working with the FBI? Calibri spat blood. You've betrayed everything. I'm doing what I should have done years ago, ending you. Sirens wailed outside, closer now, purposeful. The FBI had been awaiting Matteo's signal. Get Antonio out of here. Matteo ordered Frankie. Clara goes with him. Now! Clara helped her brother towards the exit, but her gaze lingered on Matteo one last time. Their eyes met across the rubble and smoke, and in that shared glance, an unspoken promise passed between them. Gratitude, affection, and a connection far deeper than either could articulate filled the space between them. A moment later, Clara found herself outside, drawing in fresh air as FBI agents swarmed the warehouse. Agent Harper, a keen-eyed woman in her late 40s, approached with paramedics. "Antonio Brennan?" she inquired softly. Antonio nodded, clutching Clara's hand. "You're safe now. We have medical transport prepared and a comprehensive protective detail. You're going to be all right." Harper then turned to Clara. "Your testimony and Mr. Vitali's cooperation have provided us with everything we required. Carlo Calibri is finished." An hour subsequent, Clara stood outside the hospital where Antonio was undergoing evaluation. Her mother and Emma had arrived, their reunion a cascade of tears and overwhelming emotion. Antonio, though undernourished and traumatized, was alive. Doctors confirmed his physical recovery was assured. The emotional scars, however, would demand a longer healing process. Clara stepped out for some air and discovered Matteo waiting beside a black SUV, Vincent at his side. Both appeared utterly spent, yet alive. "How is he?" Matteo queried. "He'll survive. Thanks to you," Clara responded, moving closer. "The FBI mentioned you made a deal, testified against Calibri?" "Seemed like the sensible move," Matteo replied, his expression unreadable. "Calibri goes to prison. My organization receives immunity for its cooperation, and your brother gets witness protection if he desires." "And us?" Clara gestured toward the hospital. "My family?" Matteo remained silent for an extended period. "My council convened an hour ago. Vincent, Frankie, the other captains. They wanted me to cut ties, compensate you, relocate you somewhere remote, eliminate any connection between your family and my organization." Clara's heart plummeted. "And I told them no." Vincent stepped forward, his demeanor stern but not unkind. "Miss Brennan, you've become what we term a liability. You possess too much knowledge about Mr. Vitali's operations. Your family's presence creates vulnerabilities. Conventional wisdom dictates we sever all ties." But Clara fixed her gaze on Matteo. "But I am not conventional," he stated, moving closer, his eyes locked with hers. "You saved my life that night in the parking lot. You saved Tommy during the assault. You refused to abandon me when I was dying. You risked everything to locate your brother, and in doing so, you helped me dismantle my most perilous adversary." He took her hand, and Clara felt her breath catch. "You're not a liability, Clara. You're an asset. More than that, you're someone I trust in a world where trust is rarer than gold." "Matteo, what are you saying?" "I'm saying I want you to remain. You, your mother, your sister, Antonio, when he's ready. I'll establish your family. Legitimate businesses, protection, security. Your mother regains her restaurant. Emma completes college. Antonio receives the support he needs." Clara's eyes widened. "You'd do all that?" "I'd do more." Matteo's voice softened. "I'd offer you a position within my organization, if you wished. You're astute, courageous, resourceful. You discern patterns others overlook. You'd be invaluable in my world." "Your world nearly got me killed," she pointed out. "It did, multiple times." Matteo's smile was faint but genuine. "But you're still here, still fighting. That signifies something." Vincent cleared his throat. "For what it's worth, Miss Brennan, I endorse this arrangement. You've demonstrated your trustworthiness under impossible circumstances. That is a rare quality." Clara looked between them, her mind reeling. Just a week prior, she was a waitress preoccupied with rent. Now, she was being offered a place within a Mafia organization, protection for her family, and something she had never anticipated, a sense of belonging. "What about us?" she asked Matteo softly, referring to the unspoken connection between them. "That's your decision." Matteo's thumb grazed her knuckles. "I won't pretend my world is safe or ordinary. But if you wish to try, if you want to discover where this leads, I'm willing to take that risk." Clara contemplated all she had lost: her father, 2 years with Antonio, her innocence. But she also considered what she had gained: strength, purpose, a man who regarded her as the most significant person in his perilous world. "I want my mother far removed from any illicit operations," she stated finally. "Emma finishes school without knowing details. Antonio receives therapy and time to heal." "Consider it done," Matteo affirmed. "And I want to learn everything, how your organization functions, how to safeguard myself, how to truly be useful instead of merely protected." Matteo's smile broadened. "I can arrange that then." "Yes," Clara squeezed his hand. "I'll stay. We'll try this." Matteo pulled her close, his arms encircling her as naturally as breathing. "You didn't just save my life that night, Clara. You became a part of it, a part of me." She looked up at him, this killer with a conscience, this dangerous man who had chosen to protect her over power. "Good," she murmured, "because you're stuck with me now. I can live with that." As the sun ascended over Chicago, painting the city in gold, Clara Brennan realized her life would never again be normal. Yet, standing there in Matteo's arms, her brother alive, her family secure, she uncovered something unexpected. She no longer desired normalcy. She craved this dangerous, complicated, real existence. She craved him, and for the first time in her life, she was precisely where she belonged,